Fight a shark. Fighting merfolk. Entire deep sea campaign. Flood the dungeon as they escape. Sink the ship that they're on. So if you want to get your toes wet with underwater D&D, I'm hoping that this video can give you everything you need. Let's start with the reason why you clicked on this video. Combat in water. Range weapons. Horrible idea. The ranger will need something else. Range weapons are at disadvantage underwater, unless you're using a crossbow, a net, or a throwing weapon like a javelin. You know how range weapons have two ranges, your normal range and far range? If your target is in your far range, it's an automatic miss underwater. And just for some of you folks out there, firearms do not work underwater. All melee weapons are at disadvantage underwater, unless they deal piercing damage, or unless the creature has a swimming speed, like a merfolk or a water genasi. Then it doesn't matter what melee weapon they use, it's a straight roll again. All creatures fully submerged underwater are resistant to fire damage. Pretty obvious, but it's good to know if there's a pool in the room and some crazy wizard is throwing a fireball. That's it. That is D&D 5e's rules for combat underwater. Sure, you can do vulnerable to lightning damage. You could do vulnerable to thunder damage. You could double the range of thunder damage since it's underwater. Those are all great and make sense, but they're not rules as written. But that doesn't stop me. For lightning damage, I'd probably make the lightning strike 10 feet wide rather than any 5 foot, so you're just doubling the width, zap, zap, zap. On top of, doubling the thunder damage or doubling the range of thunder damage, probably hear it within a mile. Wait, though. That's not the end of this. What about swimming? What about breathing? What about visibility? What about water pressure? Let's go over it. Water-based encounters are great for mixing things up. It's perfect for adding a new challenge for old players. It can also add a lot of great depth to your adventure. While preparing for a Jaws-themed campaign, I found it really annoying to hunt down all the rules for underwater from different books, different blogs, to different videos. I felt it didn't make it easy for new players learning quickly, let alone a DM who needs to learn rules ASAP. So this is my attempt to put everything in one place. I'm going to try to stay organized as possible, but I am going to suggest some house rules along the way. It might get a bit dense, but hold your breath. Hit that subscribe button and share this video with your DM and or fellow players, so next time you face off against a Kraken, you don't all drown instantly. Let's dive in.
What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor early in the morning?
First, creatures with a swim speed, you swim at your full speed. Creatures with no swim speed, like a human, have half speed. That's different than difficult terrain though. Being underwater is not difficult terrain. So therefore, there can be difficult terrain in the water. Dense seaweed, muckiness, whatever. You come up with your own idea. But you can always use a dash action to double your speed and get where you're going. If you don't have a swim speed, you cannot swim longer than 8 hours. For every hour of basic swimming, roll a con save, DC 10. If you fail, take a level of exhaustion, just like climbing or hiking. This is why I'm a fan of 1 D&D's exhaustion rather than 5e's exhaustion. Basically, 1 D&D exhaustion is just way more playable, way more fun, way easier to run. All right, let's move from swimming and head over to holding your breath. How long can you hold your breath underwater? Your Constitution modifier +1 equals the number of minutes you can hold your breath. Minimum 30 seconds. When you run out of air, you are considered choking or suffocating, which means rather than the minutes, it's now rounds. So con modifier +1, number of rounds until you drown. After all those rounds are up, the start of your next turn, your HP is at 0. You start rolling death saves, can't be healed or stabilized until you can breathe again. You have 2 rules that are overlapping and your table might come to a screeching halt. You can't stabilize underwater if you can't breathe. If you succeed all your death saves underwater, you're supposed to stabilize. So technically, if you're rolling death saves underwater, you die. I should note though, casting water breathing allows creatures who can't breathe underwater to use verbal component spells. So that means if you can't breathe underwater, verbal spells are off the table. A fun house rule that I like to use for holding your breath underwater is to think of holding your breath as concentration. If you get hit by an attack while holding your breath, roll a Constitution saving throw to see if those minutes that you're holding your breath turn into rounds. Makes it feel way different than just holding your breath until you run out of air or hit 0 HP, which mechanically feels just like fighting in the woods. So yeah, holding your breath is like concentration. Makes every hit matter even more. So let's talk about water breathing solutions so that can also be in the front of your mind when in combat. Obviously, water breathing magic. There's a spell for it, there are potions for it. That's about it. If you're going to use magic, you got to be careful of dispel magic or an anti-magic ray. I'll take that water breathing away real quick. You can also find ways to bring air with you down. There's probably some clever methods. For DMs, if you have a water breather in your party, let them shine. Give that player as much time as they can have to cross all the T's and dot all the I's for the party. You know, they can scout for the enemy. They can look for pockets of hidden air in a cavern. They could arguably share air with the rest of the players. There's no official rule on how to share your air underwater, but I would say for non-water breathers, it would cost you an action to give somebody a minute of your air to them. If you're a water breather, think of it like a rogue with dash. You can also do it as a bonus action. This could literally save lives. It could keep the game moving without you as the DM having to come up with little save points along the way. Though that being said, save points along the way, kind of helpful when diving under the ocean. Now that we got breathing underwater, holding your breath, swimming, let's talk about visibility. It's pretty dark underwater. Since torches and lanterns aren't going to help, you're really going to need to rely on the light spell or dancing lights. Because visibility, on top of bright, dim, and darkness, we have now clear water and murky water that we have to deal with. As we all know, the deeper, darker, and murkier water is, the harder it is to see things far away. So, clear water and bright light gives you 60 feet of visibility. Clear water and dim light is 30 feet of visibility. Murky or no light is 10 feet of visibility. Okay, so that covers the basics of a little bit underwater or just swimming through water. But let's dive deeper. 100-foot depth. Creatures with no swim speed treat every hour of swimming as if it was 2 hours of travel on land. Remember that 8 hours swimming cap I mentioned earlier? Now that's 4 hours. And at 200-foot depth, creatures with no swim speed treat every hour swimming as if it was 4 hours. So that 8-hour cap is now 2 hours. You might be wondering though, why is there an 8-hour hard limit on swimming for creatures that don't have a swim speed? The rules are like, just say it's hard limit. You can't go further than that. If you're a DM and you get in the situation that they've been swimming for their max time, especially if they're deep diving, so they'll be more likely to come up. I would probably rule that they instantly take a point of exhaustion. I think that's where you start pulling out the little sand timer, and every time it runs out, all non-swimming creatures, they get a point of exhaustion, just instant. Their bodies are too tired. There's no chance to save. That's what I would do. So deep dive conclusion. Exhaustion is a thing. Exhaustion matters underwater. It's a ticking time bomb that's coming after you. If you're going to DM underwater, keep that in mind. If you're going to be a player underwater, keep this in mind. Let's say I'm going to fall into water. What do? You roll your fall damage, a d6 per 10 feet, and then you roll either an acrobatic or an athletic. DC 15. If you pass, you cut the fall damage in half. Armor. What happens if you wear heavy armor and go into the water? Nothing happens. So now that you know how to run underwater combat, you know how to run almost an entire campaign underwater. If you're going to do Theater of the Mind, you're all set. But if you're going to use minis, think about using narration and Theater of the Mind for swimming purposes and saving the minis for combat. It's going to save a lot of energy and it's going to make the game feel more tense. But here's 4 tips on how to maximize your minis. Similar to flying, you're dealing with 3D space. So in the case of underwater, typically players are starting at a higher altitude than monsters coming from below the sea level. Unless there's a tactical, advantage, a tactical flank, whatever it is. And to illustrate that, I would recommend getting risers, just like you would for your flying. You can do clear acrylic, you can get magnetic extendable poles, You can also use upside down shot glasses and full-size glasses if you're tight on a budget. I'll have some Etsy links down below, and you can use those. Number 2, remember every 1 inch is 5 feet, and that even means diagonal in 3D space. Get yourself a cheap 12-inch ruler or a really tiny measuring tape. Just something that you can just point and move around and get things right. And there's a link to a basic wooden 12-inch ruler down below. Bases or maps. You can get blue if you want, it doesn't have to be. Make sure it's gridded. The reason why I say you have to get a gridded map or base is because you're dealing with 3D space and swimming. The grid is just an extra large ruler to help you do math, and players can help count and then go up and be like, yeah, I'm right here. It helps so much. The moment you remove a grid from being when you're underwater, exponential work. Number 4, scatter terrain. Technically, scattered terrain doesn't happen if you're in like the middle of the ocean and you're swimming. Maybe you can get some fish or sharks or just whatever swimming around. Scattered terrain really matters underwater when you're on the ocean floor or near caverns or coral reefs. Get some rocks. I made some of these rocks out of foam that I can just place down, right? These will do great. But I also got these off Etsy, and if I can find them, I'll put the link down below. It's just underwater rocks. And then I painted it grays, blues, and all the fancy colors. And I put glossy Mod Podge on top to give it that wet look. Or the bottom of a lake. I totally forgot you can just go into a lake. 5, just as a bonus, go to aquariums. Get like those plastic seaweed things. Also, you can get those on Etsy, link below. Now, if you want to go above and beyond that, you can of course add caustic lights, humidifiers, smoking effects. You can add music or sound effects. I'll talk about sound effects and music in a video down the road, but my friend Sebastian at Atmoseeker has a great channel talking about how you can rig up your own custom colored lights, caustic lights, do stuff underwater, do stuff in caves, and really make your table exciting. It's really awesome. He's helped me a lot to fix up my space. Hey, share this video with everyone you know who plays D&D. You don't have to just start from scratch and start homebrewing and start digging and looking for all the rules that are scattered everywhere. You have this video as ground zero on how to run underwater D&D, at least for 5e. Until next time.